Welcome to the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. We're happy you're here. On the podcast, we're certain that you'll relate to the caregiver stories and find comfort with your honorary sisters. Now, before we start, I want to remind you to go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, and sign up for our newsletter. It's full of useful information that you can immediately use. Now, let's learn more about today's guest.
Hey, everybody, this is JJ.
And I'm Natalie.
And I'm Emily.
And welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver. All right. So Jay, let's get to the show. We've got Anne on here with us and we are so excited to have her. She is totally awesome. So she's going to be sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly about all things kind of caregiving, but we can all relate to that. We've all been there. So like us, Anne has been a caregiver, but honestly, she's so much more. So Jay, why don't you tell us about our sister in care?
So many people that we talk to have wonderful backgrounds. And Anne, she is no exception. She's been a practicing physician for over 35 years. But when her mother developed dementia, she used all the lessons from patients and their families to see that it could be an awesome experience and what she could avoid if possible. So her caregiving story should be over. She should not need any help, right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, no, she's a doctor. She says even with her experience, that she made those normal caregiver mistakes. She asked for help too late. She fell into depression. She overworked. She burned out. And she was just trying to juggle work, children, and care. But then things changed. And today, Anne is the author of Making Tough Decisions about End-of-Life Care and Dementia. In addition, she is a founder of Together in Dementia, which offers courses, consultation, and she's a host on a blog about that care. So I'm excited to talk to Anne because I want to hear what changed everything for her.
I cannot wait to hear Anne's confession. Right?
So Anne, we're ready.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us about, we lost Anne completely. Oh no, I'm going to pause. Actually, let's just wait. She should jump back on here in just a second. I'm just going to keep recording. So Anne's coming on.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And so I think Anne's got, and you know what? Anne, you mentioned Anne wrote a book, right?
She did.
Yeah.
Making Tough Decisions. Yep.
About end-of-life care. And I think that is definitely hard to do. And hard to do as a family. I mean, if you think about what we had to do, we have, Anne's.
I got her. She's coming back in.
Let's bring her. Let's bring back Anne.
Oh my goodness.
That's okay.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah. You know what? It's totally fine. We're just, okay. And there you are. You're
there
beautiful. Anne is
I don't know what happened when you guys, I don't know. It's like caregiving.
You know what?
Think you're doing fine. And then
think you're fine. You know what? If you want to know what live is about and what recording is about, we're not even going to remotely edit this out. We're going to say, this is a perfect example of caregiving. Everything's going the way you want. And then
before you know it, it says you can't see it. You have to hit a button and it hangs up on you. Anyway, I'm back.
Thanks, Anne.
So Anne, tell us about your caregiving journey. Tell us what got you there. Okay. We know you've been a doctor. We know your mom. Tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. So I, as you said, I was doing my doctor thing, probably a little too seriously, like emotional range about from here to here, being a doctor, being a mom, and just going along with my life. Started noticing a lot of things slipping with my mom. Knew it was getting serious when she started doing things like going outside in the middle of a Nebraska winter with just a little tiny windbreaker on, and then ran out of gas because she forgot to put gas in her car. And so she was going to freeze to death out there trying to figure out how to get help while she had no gas in her car. And we knew that, as much as she wanted to be independent, as many mothers do, me included, we were going to have to step in and do a little bit more support. I lived about 1,500 miles away, and my sister lived 1,500 miles the other way. And then a couple brothers still lived in the same town as my mom, but they didn't think that she was having issues. And so I started flying out about every 6 weeks and would find piles and piles of papers that she was shuffling. And, she was starting not to pay bills. So my sister and I started kind of pulling in some support a little bit more. My sister actually moved from California back to Nebraska to be there more day to day. And we had talked about and got her diagnosis of dementia, and really started helping pull in the gaps in where she needed it, trying to respect her very strong spirit, her spirit of independence. And my sister and I had talked about that when she got to the later stages, that she would come out to live in Connecticut, partly because I was a specialist in geriatrics, partly because I was a specialist in end-of-life care. And we thought, okay, that would make sense. But as all caregiving journeys, things got a little more complicated. My sister's life got more complicated. And so when the time came, my mom basically was doing okay, continuing to decline, needed to the point where she needed more support during the daytime, but still was very reluctant to not live independently. So we actually had her start volunteering at a day program. And she probably was good at volunteering for a few weeks, but soon she forgot that she was a volunteer and just became a participant, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
And so then she got to stay in her independent living a little bit longer. And she was just starting to leave her apartment at night and get lost in the hallways. And we knew that we were about to have to do some kind of intervention and have another difficult conversation with her about moving up to a higher level of care. But she had a stroke. And at that point I said that if she's going to need a much higher level of care, it's time for her to come live with me, which put a little bit of a wedge in my sisters and my relationship, which had been getting stronger and stronger. And it just goes to show that whole caregiver journey, you never know what's going to hit you. And with, like you guys, my sister was my support in this grieving part of watching my mom decline. And we had so much fun with her in all kinds of ways, but there was still that sadness that comes, when you lay your head on the pillow at night and think, where's the mom that raised me? She's changing. And so my mom moved out much, much more declined than she had been. So had a big drop off after that stroke. And that's when I thought, okay, we've just put her in a place where she can't, not that we put her there. She just moved into, again, assisted living, but a memory unit or a unit that specialized in dementia care. And so that she couldn't leave. We talked about her living with me and my family at the time. And she was like, absolutely not. I do not want to live with you. Yeah. I want a little bit of space.
Yeah. That would be my mom being like, yeah, I'd really rather not live with Natalie. Yeah. And I'm like, me neither.
Yeah. Well, again, I mentioned that my emotional range was pretty narrow at the time too. And probably it was more on the, not, bossy daughter, doctor side. Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. So when she moved there, I thought, okay, she's in a locked unit. I have to make sure that I go there every day. So I put my expectations way up. I had a kid in high school, a kid in middle school, a kid in grade school. I had a full-time job that was more than full-time, honestly. And I just started thinking, I have to do it all. I have to, and I went from this, mild-mannered caregiver who did all the right things to control freak, visiting too often. And I just started, talk about I expected ugly emotions. I didn't expect the level of ugly that I went to. And I And if my husband at the time said, are you doing okay? I would snap at him. And I was like, I would leave the assisted living at night after visiting her, and I would sob all the way home.
Oh, yeah.
And, and I was like, I quit seeing my friends. I quit going out with my friends, and I love my friends. They're my lifeline. And I stopped laughing, and I laugh when I'm nervous. I laugh when I'm embarrassed. I laugh when I'm happy. I laugh when I'm sad. I now know I do not laugh when I'm depressed. And so I basically hit a wall. I wasn't nice to my mother. I wasn't nice to my kids. I wasn't nice to my husband. I was not nice to my coworkers. And I finally went to therapy, and so happy I did. My therapist was wonderful. She retired a year ago. She tried to fire me several times and I would go, no, we're joined for life at the hip.
Oh, I love codependency.
So she had to retire to get rid of me.
That's nice.
Yeah. So she got me meditating, and I started journaling. And between those two things, and then having her as a safe place to check in, I started just finding so much joy in the day-to-day with my mom. I started finding some balance. I brought in other people to do engagement work with her in the evening, for some nights to spend more time with my own kids. I started making sure I went out with my friends again. The journaling helped me figure out other stuff I was holding on to. I started opening up my emotional range bit by bit by bit. And honestly, had I not kind of sunk to that low, I don't think I'd be where I am now, as happy as I am now. And the growth that I was learning from my mother, my interactions with my mother, slowing down and enjoying like the present with my mother. I think my relationship with my mother grew rather than shrunk as it changed. Obviously, I mended my relationship with my sister. I'm closer to all my other siblings. And I just feel like I live with so much more depth now. I quit after she died, actually, I just kept journaling and kept kind of going through my self-discovery, and got out of the career that was it was great in so many ways, but there was so much toxicity there. I got out of that, and, I'm so much happier now, just living my dream, and so grateful to my mom for all the things she taught me from the beginning when I was a baby till she taught me how to really receive care, because she did such a gracious job as a person living with dementia, receiving care, that now I'm like, oh, asking for help and getting help is amazing. And so that's what I've been trying to do since she's died, is just learn how to continue living in the present like that, and give and take with care, and personal care, emotional care, spiritual care, all and live the full picture now.
I want to be your best friend, Anne. Your mom with dementia taught you how to receive care. That's like so beyond insightful. And I just want to say, because I know the girls are going to have questions too, the meditating and the journaling. For me, with Jason, in my loneliest moments when we were in New York, when he was receiving cancer treatment, the way that I kind of found the balance is 100% through journaling. And I found it through using the Caring Bridge. I couldn't handle all the pressure of social media. We never told anyone that my husband had cancer the entire time on Facebook. We did not make it Facebook, whatever. It was too much. I couldn't handle all that. But I used the Caring Bridge, and what initially started as just updates, I actually turned into my personal journal that it was allowed me to be very insight oriented and seeing the things within myself. And the funny part is there were probably 100 people who were checking things. And I felt safe. And journaling, I'm a mental health provider. Journaling really works. And I love that you say meditation and journaling. Journaling works.
It does. I mean, and it does more than works. Like I grew, right. I grew in there. I learned to ask myself questions rather than just, staying in that little tight bud. It was amazing. It gives me shivers to think how much I've grown since that. I mean, I feel like it's the hero's journey that I went off on this journey, got faced with this thing that I didn't ask for, as we're all the reluctant caregivers, right?
Right.
Yeah. Got faced with something. It was my mom's journey too, but I think she almost like volunteered for it as another way to nurture me or to nurture all of her children. I think we all grew through it.
Yeah.
And we definitely came together as a family in ways that I never thought we would. And I mean, all of us are really together now. It's just amazing. And a lot of that was through the insights of the journal and me going, is this the way I want it to be forever? No, I don't. I want to change this. I have two choices. It stays the same or it gets better. I mean, once you see it, you don't let it get worse, right? I guess there's always three choices: gets better, stays the same, or gets worse. Right. But if you're doing the work, it's not going to get worse. It's going to get better. It may not feel great all the time, but it gets better.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So I always I know that as a practicing physician, I hear you and you're like, look, I call that bottom of the barrel, and then I start digging when I hit that point and I'm just wiped out. And I felt like that with having to help Mom with her Parkinson's for 20 years, especially over the last 3 years. Emily is in the trenches every day with that. And we, are always, she is the one that we always hope is finding that way to get her energy back. But when you were seeing patients and is there ever a time, do you think, in the medical practice now where I know you're there to care for your patient, but do you feel like there are things changing? Are people recognizing that caregiver really needs some help as well? That person is melting.
I tell the caregiver, I use my prescription pad. I tell them, you are the hottest commodity that
listen, Emily.
Yes. Listen, Emily. I will talk to my patient and then I'll say, we're going to stop for a minute. And we're going to talk to Emily. And I'll say, Emily, you are the hottest commodity. You need to, what do you need? What would help you? Because if anything happens to you, and we can talk about what does happen to people if they don't care for themselves. I mean, I'm an example, but I'm a success story in the end, right? Some people get really, after my mom died, I actually did get sick and part of the reason I quit my job was for that toxic reason, but part of the reason was because I also got sick and I needed to be on the couch for a year.
Wow.
But if you don't take care of yourself, and what if something happens to you while you're in the middle of the caregiving role? And then where does that leave your mom, your dad, your husband, your wife, your sister, your brother, whomever? And so I definitely tell people, you're the hot commodity, and I'm going to write a script here for you to mostly I want people to ask for either somebody else to help or somebody to be paid for. And I don't know how many times I hear, we can't pay for anyone. And I'm like, there's a rate, and honestly, these are often people who can afford it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And I'll say, this is a rainy day fund time. You have funds for a rainy day. And they say, yes. I was like, it's raining. This is the time to use those funds. Now is the time. And, see a social worker, talk to people about how to to figure it out, barter if you have to. But sometimes, even if it's to go do something else for someone else to get you out of the direct care so that you can feed your soul in a different way. Because I loved my kids, but I used to say I'm a really good part-time mother. As a full-time mother, I probably wouldn't have been so good because it had been the same, but by changing it up and going to work, I kind of filled a different part of my well. And then for my work, my kids filled me up. And it was that balance of different, we have so many parts of us and they all need some kind of attention. So if you're only doing the same thing and you're only with the same person day in and day out, that's taxing and you need something else, someone else, somewhere else.
That is the money.
You need to get Emily the prescription pad. I need you to write it up there that says Emily.
Emily. Yeah. We might become, speed dial sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's just so many things that you said that I relate to. It will be shocking to all of our viewers, but very quickly found that I am a type A personality. While I am the middle child, I am mustard. JJ is Grey Poupon. We don't even know what Emily is, but she's the baby.
It's like peanut butter. Everybody
but I mean, we all have lived experiences, and then we all have the reason for the development of our personalities and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I am very much a perfectionist. And I am somebody myself who expects so much more of myself than anyone else. And it's really where the concept of a reluctant caregiver came from, because I put so much pressure on myself to be there for Jason. And then I found like I just kept feeling like I was failing. And the reality is I wasn't failing. I was failing to my standard, but Jason was very happy with what I was doing, minus the cooking. But I mean, he couldn't eat. So there was no amount of cooking I was going to be able to do because Jason had a type of throat cancer. There was no cooking I was going to do. And so I had to find ways to forgive myself, to give myself grace, and so now I'm a recovering perfectionist. I still fight the need to be really good at everything. And so I always try to say, don't let great be the enemy of good. And so some days good is good. I got up, I brushed my teeth, I kept my person alive, I went to bed and slept 8 hours, nailed it.
Absolutely. I remember one time when when I first got my mom back from Nebraska to Connecticut. I live in Connecticut. When I got her to Connecticut, like that whole plane ride was straight out of the hospital through a snowstorm into a plane. Wow. I was panicked. My sister and I were, I was in the middle of that. And when so she couldn't make the stairs. We made a bed for her in the living room for a little bit. I had her tucked in. I knew my kids were all tucked in. I was like, everybody's here. Everybody's safe. It wasn't pretty, but everybody was safe. And I was like, good enough for today. Good. Yeah. And I constantly say good enough for government work, which was, my dad worked for the government when I was
good enough for government work.
It's like,
I've heard that before.
So that started becoming my mantra for the whole caregiving journey. It was like, there's no bow tie, there's no bow on this. There is no sparkle. This is definitely not a Facebook moment, but it's people are where they belong.
Yeah.
So I hear you talking about, because I'm always looking for ways that kind of rejuvenate. I hear you say, hey, I was able, when I finally kind of got up, you went out with your friends, you realized, hey, I need to get my life. What other things, where else did you find that joy where you said, okay, I'm going to get my energy back? Where other places did you see?
Well, for me, I needed nature. And so I got a portable transport wheelchair. So I would grab my mom, put her in the wheelchair, and I would just get out into nature in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I found places that had a paved, and because I thought if I need it, she likely needs it too. And that way, and I started trying to do as many things when I was with my mom. I tried to make sure that I started to do rejuvenating things with her. One thing was I knew I needed some exercise, and I started to hurt my back from lifting and or being in an awkward position and not thinking for a minute. And so I knew I needed some yoga. So I got like chair yoga tapes, and I would put them in with her, and they were mostly like from like the 80s. So everybody had on like neon colored leggings, and
jazzercise.
It would exactly. It was hilarious, and it would get my mom giggling and me going, what? But so I would try to exercise, and I would just be like, this is hilarious. I loved to read, and she wasn't able to like really hear a long story. So I just got a book of short stories so that again, it filled my soul, and she could hold it long enough potentially. And then when it got a little further in her disease, I didn't read out loud as much, but part of her, that stroke took her ability, and her dementia took her ability to read. But she didn't want to just hear me yammer all day. So I would start with we would start reading stories. And then in the beginning, I would ask some questions, and she lost her ability to speak as well, but she could speak with her eyebrows like there is no tomorrow. Like I used to say, she conducted an orchestra with those babies. It would be like up and down and back and forth. And so I would say, what'd you think of this part? And she would give me a scowl, or, so we kind of had conversations after I read her, and she would, or she'd look at me quizzically, and I would like fill in the gap again. So we just really tried to keep a connection that way. But honestly, I tried to do things with my mom that fed me while trying to engage her. So people are often like, what will engage the person? And I say, what will engage us both? I knew what she wanted. She wanted something that she could see, a product by the end of the day that made her, that she was very industrious. So for her, a jigsaw puzzle was really good. And so, early on, there might be several pieces, but in the end, we started doing like 6-piece jigsaw puzzles, and she couldn't even do them. I was basically doing them. I put them in her hand, and I would put them into place. So I just knew that if we ended the night with a jigsaw puzzle, however minimal that might be, or some pieces in a jigsaw puzzle, that served her. She got to see some pieces go in, and that was good. But the other engagement things were filling my soul.
I love that. I love that.
Because there's only 24 hours in a day.
Hey, ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day. And the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the U.S. and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing.
Yeah, I struggle with the exercising because it's hard to get her out. And I keep telling JJ and Natalie, I need a jogging stroller for adults. I know they make them. So I'm like, that would be awesome if I could take her with me on my walks or be able to go to the gym with her. That is something really interested in.
Yeah. Then if they then get it.
Yeah. Okay. Get it.
Rainy day fun.
You heard it, girls. Get it.
Stop. Just get it. I mean, because your health is so important. And if getting her out and walking and you being able to get out, the other thing, I mean, I had when my mom would sleep and if she was at my house, I would have a monitor and I would go around the block, around and around and around the block. And I'd have the monitor because the range was good enough. And I just basically told my neighbors, if I cut through your yard, because I hear her, I would beeline, if I was as far away as possible, I would go through yards to get home. But
Like it.
I still got out and I got a walk in. I just did it in a tight circle, which was better than, I just try to find new ways.
And did you ever have to cut through a yard, or was she okay?
I did.
A few moments. You did? Okay.
Because sometimes she was impulsive and I was like, one time I did. Yeah. I cut through a yard.
And I really like that you cut through a yard. Hopefully that was pretty amusing. I hope there was Ring cameras and people, I mean, honestly, you would be fantastic on like those episodes where they're all like, lady runs through yard, not sure what happens. And they're like, what's wrong with her? And then you somehow get into a cute, but whatever. So I have a question before we do our lightning round. I have your book right here. So where in the process did you write this? When did you write this? And tell me what inspired you to do so.
Okay. So when my mom moved to Connecticut and I started saying, I want to practice the kind of medicine I practice on my patients, on my mom. Mm-hmm. And I was trying basically, which is to really focus on her quality of life, not on her quantity of life. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to basically demedicalize her and start looking at her medicines and saying, is this really necessary? Mm-hmm. Avoiding hospitalizations, because the hospitalization around her stroke, this hospitalization almost killed her. And she was miserable the whole time. And so I wanted to start practicing the medicine that I practiced. And my siblings weren't as sure about that. I am their little sister and I'm in my family, the dumb one. So I had to convince, I know. Right. They're very smart.
So med school wasn't like Outlast, Outwit, Outplay with Survivor.
Yeah.
Like, really?
They still know me as the 5-year-old. But so I looked around for a book because again, I come from this pretty hyper intellectual family. And I looked for a book to help them and I couldn't find anything. So when my mom did, I explained everything to them over and over. And then when my mom died, and I took that year on the couch, I didn't know how to practice medicine at that point because I had developed an autoimmune disease and had just significant fatigue, and I couldn't predict when I could be in a patient's room or not. And so I kind of took that year and I wrote a book rather than go into an office. And so that's how I started to practice medicine. And it's full of stories. It says every chapter begins with my family story, but then it has all the stories from all my patients as well. They've all been changed. People say, what about Pete and Anne Marie? I'm like, I changed everybody's names and genders. For me, she's still Mrs. Smith. So I don't know. You'll have to tell me the whole story. And then I'll get my vision back of who it really is.
Yeah. It's so funny. What you've done is you did journaling. You just essentially wrote your stories. Because think about how we learn. We learn through storytelling. We learn through that because we relate. And so you took your experiences and the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you shared them with others to say, you can do this too. You can make the hard decisions, and here you go. And I mean, this was probably very cathartic for you too, I would think.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping one thing, I mean, one of the advantages I had as a caregiver, even though I didn't take advantage of it, as you know, was that I had seen so many people in my practice of 25 years at that point, that we're doing beautifully as caregivers. I saw people who were doing terribly, and I saw people who were doing beautifully, and then I saw a lot in the middle. But the people that were doing beautifully were what I knew that was aspirational. I knew it could be done because I'd seen people do it. And I'm not sure. I mean, I think that's why you guys are doing this podcast, is to show people it can be great. It'll be ugly at times, but there'll be a lot of laughter, a lot of fun, and we can focus more on that as well. And those people taught me that, and they're in the stories, and some of the ugly too. But again, that's to remind you that you have a choice. When it starts getting ugly, you don't have to stay there. You can flip it.
I love that you have a choice. Because in the moments when you feel you're most overwhelmed and you're kind of fight, flight, or freeze, and in a crisis brain, you think you don't have a choice.
Right.
But if you can step back and try to regulate yourself through breathing, which is a great strategy when you feel overwhelmed, you're able to kind of access the thinking part of your brain. And you're like, I do have a choice. I will be okay.
And you guys know my favorite is hand on heart.
I love it.
Between breathing and hand on heart, I'm like, thank God for hand on heart, which also helps you regulate that flight, fright, or freeze, is slow down your sympathetic and bring your parasympathetic back in. Your oxytocin pumps out and you're like, oh yeah.
I love that. So just explain that, because we know, but for our listeners, this is a fantastic intervention strategy. So when you're feeling overwhelmed, and why don't you describe purpose and what it's meant to do?
Okay. So I tell a lot of my patients, just to put your hand on your heart. And sometimes I used to put my hand on my mom's heart as well. But hand on heart will take you from, a high state of stress. So, and then it'll bring out your natural oxytocin, which is like the breastfeeding hormone, or the mothering hormone, but we all have it. It's the one that'll calm you down. So by putting your hand on your heart, and then, as Natalie said, taking a couple of deep breaths. I have one patient that used to go, hand on heart, hand on heart. I was like, no. In through your nose, out through your mouth, hand on heart. That is what works. Not, like you can't keep going hand on heart, hand on heart.
Not hyperventilating.
Not while hyperventilating.
Please do not hyperventilate.
Yeah.
And it's so good for grounding, because what it does is it grounds you. And so for those of you who are wondering how long to breathe in, breathe out, 4-7-8 is a fantastic way to do it. So you have your hand on your heart and take a breath in for 4 seconds, hold it for 7, and be intentional about blowing it out through your mouth, and do it audible. It feels better when you hear do it for 8 seconds. You only need to do it for about 60 seconds to 120 seconds, 1 to 2 minutes. It will make a difference. And the best part is you can do it anywhere. So I love it. Yeah. I think it's time for the lightning round.
Oh, I'm going to go first.
Okay, you go first.
Okay, Anne, here it is. So I want to know what one of your guilty pleasures is.
Ooh. Guilty pleasure.
I would say hot fudge sundae.
Oh, that's good. All right.
With really hot, thick fudge.
Extra fudge.
Extra fudge.
I don't want to have to say this about McDonald's, who clearly should be a sponsor. But I think we all know they're a little inconsistent with the ice cream machines, which will make them not a sponsor. But everybody knows it's a hit or miss. But I do love a hot fudge sundae from McDonald's. And I will say this, Jason's favorite when he feels down, he goes and he wants a caramel sundae from McDonald's. And he, of course, wants to micromanage how they put the caramel in the sundae. I'm like, Jason, please, for the love of God, just let them put the caramel in there and just eat it. So,
I never thought to ask them to do it
think about it. Remember the old school where it would be, you put a little bit of ice cream in, and then you put some in, and then you put more ice cream so that it goes down the sides.
It was more like a parfait in the old days.
Yeah. Top to bottom. But instead, he complains that they just put it on the top and then it gets all over the place and then it doesn't have.
We've lost our McDonald's sponsorship because now we're.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we lost them, but whatevs. I like that.
Okay, I'm done. That was good. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Hot
Okay.
fudge.
Okay.
Emily,
So
who's next? Lightning round, ready?
Emily, go.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. What were your must-haves? Anything that helped you get through the day, whether it was a product or just something else. I mean, we know like the meditation and the yoga and the exercise. I feel like we all hold that very close to our heart. But any sort of thing helped you?
I needed hugs. So my kids got used. I'd come in and I'd go, I need a hug, and they would do it, and they still will. I mean, I just got them trained, and they're like, do I have to? I'm like, you do. And so I learned to ask, I learned to receive hugs when I needed them, because some days I just needed to be held.
And this, I kind of feel similar when my babies come over. I'm like, hug your mama. And it's a cry moment. And I get teared up. I'm like, these are my babies, but they're like 6'5", 6 foot now. But I can still just love on them. And that gives me such comfort. So I totally understand that.
Yeah, definitely.
There is scientific proof that if you hold a hug for 20 seconds or longer, it is actually very regulating. And it also does that same hand to heart. It releases the endorphins that really help with the calming and peace like that. So I am a supporter of hugs.
Natalie, I love that, because I thought it was 6 seconds. I didn't think it was 20 seconds.
It is 20.
Because in my family, we used to go 6-second hug, and then we would we would start counting 1, 1.5.
Okay, that's definitely taking
1
20.
Exactly.
I'm going to try that.
I can tell you can Google it. Thank you, Google. And you can Google it. It is definitely 20 seconds. And I absolutely do that with Jason. When I feel a little overwhelmed and stressed, because we all get there, I'll go to Jason and he'll be like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I need a hug, because as much as I'm a caregiver for him, he caregives right back.
Right.
So he will come and hug me, and I'm like, oh, and the smell. His smell is soothing to me, because that's my lovey.
Yeah. And my mom used to make this little squeeze, like when she would hug, she'd go, ooh. So now if I call my daughter and or if my daughter calls me and is having a bad day, I'll say, do you need a grandma squeeze? And she'll go, yes. And so it's odd. So for us, we add the audible in. I'll just go, oh, she'll go, that helps. That helps a lot.
Absolutely.
Isn't it funny how our sensory,
all of our senses. Yeah.
They absolutely help with that. And even through the phone, just the voice, the calming tones, that's what helped me. Emily listened to me and JJ listened to me when I was in New York and feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And even though I was thousands of miles away from them, I could be right with them. And so that is I love that. Okay. I'm going to get all emotional here. All right. My last question for the lightning round. Are you ready?
Ready.
Mm-hmm.
What's one or two things? What's one thing you wish you had known? What's one thing you wish you had known? Like, if I'd have known this.
I knew it. I wish I had asked for help from the get-go. I tell people to do it. I knew I needed it, and yet I didn't do it. And when I say ask for help, it doesn't have to be big. It's just, I wish I hadn't thought, I have to hold this all together myself.
That's true.
Wow.
100%.
And thank you so much. We've had such a good time. You're
so wonderful.
She is like sisterhood approved. We love Anne. Come back.
Oh my gosh.
We love you.
She's a sister.
She is so fantastic. Okay. So Anne, your book, Making Tough Decisions About End-of-Life Care and Dementia. Where can we get it?
It's on Amazon.
Okay.
That's where I would get it.
Okay.
If you don't like
Amazon,
go to Barnes and Noble and ask them to order it.
Oh, that's so sweet. So Amazon and Barnes and Noble, they're two of our favorite.
All right. Making sure we'll have it, of course, on our social media. Make sure when we do our podcast as well, we're going to tell everybody where to get it. So you can find lots of stories about Anne's past and some previous patients who are not identifiable. So
clearly confidentiality and HIPAA is maintained.
Yes.
So we want to thank everybody for joining us today as well. We know everybody's super busy, so it means the world to us that you're here and listening.
Well, friends, that's a wrap on this week's confession. Again, thank you so much for listening. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and tell your friends about the Confessions podcast. Don't forget to visit our website to sign up for our newsletter. You'll also find the video recording of all of our episodes on the Confessions website and our YouTube channel. Don't worry, all the details are included in the show notes below. We'll see you next Tuesday when we come together to confess again. Till then, take care of you. Okay, let's talk disclaimers. You may be surprised to find out, but we are not medical professionals and are not providing any medical advice. If you have any medical questions, we recommend that you talk with a medical professional of your choice. As always, my sisters and I at Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver have taken care in selecting the speakers, but the opinions of our speakers are theirs alone. The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of the Sisterhood of Care, LLC.